Hello and welcome back to the history of the Mongols. I'm your host Kyle. Last time we explored how Genghis Khan consolidated his power over the diverse Mongol tribes, effectively transforming them from a fragile alliance into a unified and formidable empire. Through calculated political reforms, Genghis dismantled existing tribal structures, centralizing loyalty exclusively under his leadership. He established the Great Yasa, a comprehensive legal code, and reorganized his army into disciplined units based on the decimal system, laying a solid foundation for the expansive empire that was to follow. After firmly establishing control within Mongolia, Genghis Khan set his sights on the Tangut Kingdom, marking the beginning of his ambitious campaigns beyond Mongol borders. In today's episode, we delve deeper into Genghis Khan's next major challenge, his confrontation with the powerful Jin Dynasty of northern China. Let's get started. After returning from the Tangut Kingdom in early 1210 and disrespecting envoys from the new Jin Emperor, Wei Xiaowang, Genghis Khan started preparations for a significant campaign. He began by gathering intelligence and reviewing his forces. Crucial information came from Muslim, Uyghur, and Ongguds merchants, as well as defectors from the Jin Dynasty, including Khitan and Chinese officials who urged an attack. By this time, the Jin Dynasty was struggling. Severe flooding in the late 1190s dramatically altered the course of the Yellow River, devastating agriculture and communities. Ongoing conflict with the Song Dynasty between 1206 to 1208 further weakened the Jin economy, causing severe inflation that rendered their paper currency nearly worthless. While Jin armies remained large and formidable, their effectiveness had declined, partly due to increased assimilation into Chinese culture, diminishing the fierce military prowess of earlier generations. In early 1211, the Turkic Karluks of Al-Malik and Kayalik submitted to Genghis Khan, providing valuable cavalry support. Genghis stationed his son-in-law, Tokuchar, in western Mongolia as a guard against potential threats, including the Naiman prince Kuchlug, who had seized power in Karakitai. Confident in his strength and believing he had divine favour, Genghis Khan set out southward in the spring of 1211. His force of approximately 100,000 was divided into two armies, one under his direct command, the other led by his eldest sons, Jochi, Chagatai, and Ogedai. By May 1211, the Mongols had crossed the Gobi Desert and entered Inner Mongolia, the grassland region between the Gobi and the Yanshan Mountains, marking China's northern border. Contrary to popular belief, Genghis Khan did not breach or bypass the well-known Great Wall of China we see today. That structure was built later, during the Ming Dynasty in the 15th and 16th centuries. The Jin Dynasty had constructed shorter sections of defensive walls, mainly from earth, and these were manned primarily by local tribes, including the Ongguds. The Ongguds, a Turkic Nestorian tribe, friendly with Genghis Khan since 1204, had previously refused a call by the Naiman Khan to attack the Mongols from behind, instead alerting Genghis to this plot. When Genghis Khan approached, the Ongguds readily submitted and opened their gates without resistance. In return, they were treated generously by the Mongols. Genghis Khan solidified this alliance by marrying one of his daughters into the Ongguds leadership, where she would represent Mongol interests effectively. The Mongol forces spent the summer resting in Ongguds territory, utilizing its pastures to strengthen their horses. During this period, they also captured a few Jin-controlled towns, including Fuzhou, which fell after minimal resistance in late August 1211. Emperor Wei Xiaowang of the Jin Dynasty was abruptly awakened by alarming news. The Mongols had reached his borders. Reacting swiftly, he ordered two substantial armies to march towards strategic points he believed the Mongols would target. The region separating the northern Chinese plains from the steppe is marked by the Yan Mountains, relatively modest peaks dotted with villages and towns within their valleys. The most critical route through these mountains is Yehuling, known as Wild Fox Ridge, located just south of Fuzhou. Genghis Khan's army, personally commanded by him, was expected to pass through Yehuling, placing him only days from the Jin capital, Zhongdu. The Jin leadership anticipated that this would be the decisive battlefield. Killing Genghis Khan would likely force his sons, commanding separate forces in the Ordos region, to retreat. As Genghis captured Fuzhou, a formidable Jin force assembled at Yehuling, consisting primarily of elite Jurchen and Khitan cavalry backed by Chinese infantry. This army was led by Hushahu, an arrogant yet influential commander with considerable experience from conflicts against the Song dynasty. It's worth noting that historical records refer to him by several complex variations of his full name, Heshili Jujun Hushahu, but for simplicity, we'll use Hushahu. Supporting Hushahu was a smaller force commanded by Wanyan Hosha, assigned to fortify Woshao-Pao, a strategic location between Fuzhou and Yehuling. Combined, these Jin forces numbered between 300,000 to 500,000 men, although many were labourers tasked with constructing defences rather than fighting. Before the Jin could fully fortify Woshao-Pao, Genghis Khan dispatched his commander, Jebei, to launch a surprise attack in August, just before Fuzhou fell. Although Hosha managed to escape with many of his troops to the southern fortress of Huihebao, this move disrupted Jin preparations. Meanwhile, Hushahu reached Yehuling and positioned his forces at Huanazui, also known as Badger's Mouth Pass, the narrowest point in the defile. He ordered his labourers to rapidly build defensive structures and dig trenches. Despite receiving intelligence from his Khitan scouts about the Mongols' capture of Fuzhou and their temporary distraction with looting, Hushahu ignored advice to attack immediately. Concerned about the Mongols' effectiveness in open-field combat, he chose to rely on the restrictive terrain of Huanazui to safeguard his flanks. As the Jin forces prepared for battle, a Khitan officer named Shimo Mingan, who had previously served as an envoy to Genghis Khan, was dispatched to reprimand the Mongol leader. However, the real objective of the mission was to gather intelligence and delay the Mongol advance. Mingan, a proud Khitan who had come to admire Genghis Khan, defected immediately and revealed Hushahu's battle plans to the Mongols. Genghis scouts quickly verified the information, and the Khan saw an opportunity to exploit the Jin's tactical errors. Realizing that the Jin had assembled a massive army to crush his invasion in one decisive strike, Genghis assessed his position. At that moment, he had only a portion of his full force with him, as his sons were still campaigning in the west. The caution displayed by Hushahu, however, worked to Genghis's advantage. Acting decisively, the Mongol forces moved into Yehuling, heading toward the Jin army stationed at Huanazui. When Jin scouts reported the sudden Mongol advance, Hushahu hastily positioned his vast army, deploying Jurchen and Khitan, heavy cavalry, and horse archers in the front, with Chinese infantry and labourers forming a dense support line. Due to the narrow terrain, the Jin forces were tightly packed, limiting their ability to manoeuvre. The battle commenced with Mongol archers unleashing volleys of arrows into the Jin ranks, creating chaos as the densely packed soldiers had no room to evade. Seizing the moment, Mukhali, one of Genghis Khan's most dependable commanders, led a charge with his lancers, breaking through the disorganized Jin front. Genghis himself followed with his elite bodyguard, the Keshig. The Jurchen and Khitan cavalry faltered, retreating into the massed Chinese infantry behind them. This retreat caused panic as the horsemen trampled their own foot soldiers, leading to a complete breakdown of discipline. The Mongols capitalized on the confusion, cutting through the fleeing Jin soldiers without mercy. The road became littered with bodies, described in the secret history of the Mongols as being heaped like rotten logs. Hushahu and Hosha regrouped at Huihebao, a fort located several kilometers to the south, attempting a last stand. Yet, by the end of the day, the Mongol forces overwhelmed the remaining Jin troops. The victory at Huanazui was celebrated as one of the Mongols' most decisive and memorable triumphs. A decade later, a Taoist monk traveling through the area to meet Genghis Khan reported seeing bones still piled high at the site, a haunting reminder of the Jin army's catastrophic defeat. The Jin's best warriors fell that day, and with them, any realistic hope of halting the Mongol advance was shattered. After the devastating defeat at Yehuling, Hushahu barely managed to escape to Zhongdu with the shattered remnants of his once formidable army. The Mongol forces continued their advance, but were temporarily halted at Juyong Pass. This pass, situated at the narrow 18-kilometre-long Guanggu Valley, served as a critical defensive choke point leading into the North China Plain, approximately 53 kilometres north of Zhongdu. During the Ming Dynasty, the famous Badaling section of the Great Wall would be constructed at the northern end of this valley, becoming a well-preserved and highly visited tourist site due to its strategic location near Beijing. In the 13th century, Juyong was already a heavily fortified stronghold, guarded by a substantial garrison. The Mongols, lacking effective siege weapons, could not breach it directly. Jebei Noyan, one of Genghis Khan's most skilled commanders, devised a cunning plan. He feigned a retreat, drawing the garrison out. Eager to avenge their fallen comrades, the defenders pursued him. About 30 kilometers from the pass, Jebei turned his forces around and ambushed them, annihilating the pursuing troops. With their defensive force obliterated, Juyong surrendered shortly afterward. By October 1211, Genghis Khan had led his army onto the North China Plain, unleashing chaos across the Jin Dynasty's territory. Although he made a brief attempt to besiege Zhongdu, the city's formidable defences proved too resilient. Recognizing the challenge, Genghis left a contingent to blockade the city and dispersed his forces to raid the surrounding areas. One Mongol army captured the imperial horse herds, significantly weakening the Jin cavalry. Meanwhile, Mongol detachments launched raids from Xijing, modern Datong, in the west, to Dongjing, modern Liaoyang, in Manchuria. Dongjing fell to Jebei Noyan after another successful feigned retreat, but Xijing resisted the Mongol assault. By February 1212, the Mongol forces withdrew to Ongguds territory, bringing with them vast loot and captured livestock. The horses and warriors needed rest after the grueling campaign. Surprisingly, the Mongols did not garrison the border passes they had fought so hard to seize. Scholars speculate that Genghis Khan may not have planned long-term occupation, or, given the Mongols' limited administrative experience, recognized that maintaining these positions would be impractical while the Jin dynasty remained strong. Despite the heavy losses at Yehuling, the Jin dynasty remained intact. The Jin leadership, still reeling from the defeat, called for reinforcements from Manchuria. Wei Xiaowang appointed Hushahu as deputy military commander and tasked him with reoccupying the critical border forts, including Juyong. Meanwhile, tensions escalated as the Jin rulers, suspicious of the Khitan population's loyalty in Manchuria, sent Jurchen colonists to assert control. Ironically, this only sparked a massive Khitan rebellion, led by Yelu Luge, who soon declared allegiance to Genghis Khan and proclaimed himself king of a new Liao dynasty. Concurrently, the Tangut began raiding the Jin's western frontier, the Song dynasty halted tribute payments to the Jin, and famine broke out in several provinces. The Mongols returned in the autumn of 1212 after giving their horses a summer of rest, but the campaign was abruptly cut short when Genghis Khan sustained a leg injury from an arrow during the assault on Xijing, forcing a temporary withdrawal. In 1213, as famine, Tangut raids, and internal strife continued to spread, Genghis Khan, now recovered from his injury, once again directed his forces towards Jin China. By July or August of that year, he had returned to the valleys south of Yehuling, where towns and settlements fell with alarming speed, either through surrender or force. On the route to Juyong, near present-day Huailai, he encountered a large Jin force under the command of Zhuhu Gaoqi. Although the Jin army reportedly numbered around 100,000, the narrow valley terrain limited their mobility, allowing the Mongols to crush them. Survivors fled to the fortified Juyong, where they had covered nearly 50 kilometers of ground with caltrops to deter the Mongol advance. Genghis Khan waited outside the fort for a month, hoping to provoke the garrison into open battle. When this failed, he left a small force to monitor the northern entrance, while sending Jebei through the hills to the south, exploiting weaker fortifications. Jebei's sudden appearance on the southern side caught the Khitan commander off guard, leading to a swift surrender. By the end of October 1213, the road to Zhongdu lay open once again. Meanwhile, political instability gripped Zhongdu. Hushahu, who had been ordered to defend the city, had instead spent weeks hunting. When the Mongols returned to Juyong in September, a messenger from Wei Xiaowang arrived to reprimand Hushahu for his inaction, but Hushahu killed the envoy out of panic. Realizing he needed to take control, Hushahu seized Zhongdu, executed the emperor, and placed Wei Xiaowang's nephew, the 50-year-old Wudubu, on the throne, expecting him to be a puppet ruler. However, Hushahu's arrogance alienated the court, and despite achieving some minor victories against Mongol raiding parties in November, his luck soon turned. Falling ill, Hushahu left Zhuhu Gaoqi to deal with the Mongols. Gaoqi's failure and hasty return to the palace to avoid Hushahu's wrath resulted in Hushahu's capture and execution by Gaoqi, who was subsequently pardoned by Wudubu and promoted to vice-commander of the empire. The political chaos at Zhongdu paralyzed the Jin government for 2 crucial months, just as the Mongols were breaking through Juyong. By December 1213, as the Mongol army gathered before Zhongdu, the new emperor sent a peace offering to Genghis Khan. Recognizing the Jin dynasty's weakened state, Genghis left a small force to blockade the capital and unleashed a massive offensive across the North China Plain. The campaign, described by one Chinese writer as creating dust and smoke that rose to heaven, devastated Hebei province, Shaanxi, and western Shandong. Nearly 100 towns fell to the Mongols, agricultural lands were ruined, and the Jin dynasty's reputation for military strength was shattered. By February 1214, Mongol forces were converging on Zhongdu. Despite the Mongols' success against smaller settlements and in open-field battles, Zhongdu posed a formidable challenge. As the Jin capital since the 1150s, it was heavily fortified, with nearly 30 kilometers of 12-meter-high earthen walls, reinforced by 900 towers equipped with various siege weapons. The city was surrounded by 3 lines of moats and fortified by 4 outer forts, each with its own defences and connected to the city via underground tunnels. The countryside had been stripped of any usable resources, from food stores to stones that could serve as projectiles. With 4,000 soldiers in each of the outer forts and an additional 20,000 guarding the city walls, Zhongdu was prepared for a prolonged siege. During the siege of Zhongdu, the Mongols found themselves facing significant challenges. Despite their relative lack of experience in siege warfare, they managed to maintain a strategic advantage by having freedom of movement outside the city. As the siege continued, desertions from the Jin side, especially among Chinese and Khitan soldiers, bolstered Mongol numbers. Some of these defectors brought valuable resources, including catapults, and provided technical expertise that enabled the Mongols to construct more siege engines. At one point, the Mongols managed to breach one of Zhongdu's gates, possibly by force or with internal assistance, only to be caught in a trap as the street behind them was set ablaze. The unit barely escaped, suffering heavy casualties. Another assault on the city was similarly repelled by the fortified garrison. To complicate matters, a disease began to spread among Genghis Khan's troops, leading to frustration as the siege dragged on. In April 1214, Genghis Khan made a strategic move by sending an envoy, a Tangut officer, to negotiate with the Jin Emperor Wudubu. The proposed terms demanded that the Jin formally submit and that Wudubu relinquish his imperial title. However, Wudubu, seeing no clear advantage in this proposal, refused. His only defense was that his forces had not yet been starved into submission. Genghis Khan responded with another message, emphasizing the Mongols' control over most of Shandong and Hebei and questioning the wisdom of further conflict. The whole of Shandong and Hebei are now in my possession, while you retain only Zhongdu. God has made you so weak that should I further molest you, I know not what heaven would say. I am willing to withdraw my army, but what provisions will you make to still the demands of my officers? Realizing his precarious situation, Wudubu agreed to terms. In May 1214, the Jin Emperor capitulated, offering a princess as a bride to Genghis Khan along with a substantial tribute, 500 boys and girls as servants, 3,000 horses, and 10,000 liang of gold, approximately 500 kilograms, alongside 10,000 bolts of silk. Pleased with this victory, Genghis Khan withdrew to Ongguds territory. It remains uncertain what Genghis Khan's long-term plans were after this success, whether he intended to pursue his remaining enemies in the west, such as Kuchlug, or perhaps turn his attention to the Song dynasty in the south. However, those plans were disrupted in June 1214, when Wudubu, fearing that Zhongdu was too vulnerable to Mongol attack, made the fateful decision to abandon the city and relocate to his southern capital at Kaifeng. This move was intended to put distance between himself and Genghis Khan, but during the relocation, Wudubu's trust in the Khitan horsemen within his retinue faltered. When he attempted to confiscate their horses, the Khitans rebelled and fled north to inform Genghis Khan. Upon hearing of Wudubu's retreat and betrayal of their agreement, Genghis Khan was furious. To him, moving to Kaifeng was not only an act of cowardice, but a clear sign of future resistance. Enraged, Genghis ordered his general Samuka, accompanied by Shimo Mingan and the 2,000 Khitan defectors, to march on Zhongdu with an army of around 50,000 men. Arriving by September 1214, they laid siege to the city. Although the garrison was significantly reduced, the remaining defenders were determined to hold out. Rather than launching a costly frontal assault, Samuka decided to starve the city into submission, aiming to break the morale of its proud but isolated defenders. In early 1215, as the siege of Zhongdu dragged on, Emperor Wudubu made a final attempt to support the city. He sent relief columns loaded with food and reinforcements. However, the Mongols intercepted and defeated these columns with ease, using the captured supplies to feed their own troops. As the noose tightened around Zhongdu, the city's hopes for rescue grew increasingly bleak. Meanwhile, the situation outside the city was just as dire for the Jin Dynasty. Most of the Jurchen homeland in Manchuria had already fallen to the Mongols and their vassal Khitan kingdom. In the chaos, one Jurchen commander in Manchuria declared independence and established his own kingdom in the far eastern part of the region. Further south, in the Shandong Peninsula, a local uprising known as the Red Coats erupted, fiercely opposing the Jin government. Any remaining Jin forces had either defected to the Mongols or been destroyed. By this point, only a narrow strip of territory along the Yellow River and the area around Xijing in the west remained under Jin control. Inside Zhongdu, the situation was growing increasingly desperate. Starvation had taken hold, and rumours of cannibalism circulated among the surviving populace. All possible animals had been eaten, and in one tragic incident, thousands of the city's young women reportedly threw themselves from the walls rather than face capture. Infighting broke out among the city's leaders. One commander even committed suicide, while another managed to break through the blockade to reach Kaifeng, only to be executed for desertion. In June 1215, Zhongdu finally surrendered. The Mongol troops, frustrated after months of siege, unleashed their anger on the surviving inhabitants. Thousands were killed, and the city was thoroughly looted. parts of Zhongdu burned for weeks, and the devastation was so severe that when a Khwarezmian embassy passed through months later, they were horrified to see piles of human bones surrounding the ruins. The ground was greasy with human fat, and disease was rampant. Some members of the embassy even fell ill and died as a result. Amid this grim aftermath, the Mongols found small moments of satisfaction. One story that emerged from the chaos involved Qin Kai, a prominent officer, who climbed a Zhongdu tower and fired arrows in every direction. When Genghis Khan heard of this, he was so amused that he granted Qin Kai ownership of all the land within the range of his arrows. Genghis often appreciated such bold and symbolic gestures. Another notable incident involved Shigi Kutuk, Genghis Khan's adopted son. When several officers tried to bribe him to share the city's loot, he refused, declaring that everything belonged to the Khan. Such loyalty was highly valued and deeply respected by Genghis, more so than all the wealth of China. The fall of Zhongdu and the flight of Emperor Wudubu marked a pivotal moment in the decline of the Jin Dynasty. Beyond the immediate loss of territory, it signaled a profound blow to Jin authority and legitimacy. For many, especially those who had endured years of natural disasters, social unrest, and weak governance, the Mongol invasion and the emperor's retreat symbolized the loss of the mandate of heaven, the divine right to rule China. According to traditional belief, when heaven withdrew its favor from a dynasty, it would grant it to another. To the people witnessing these events, it seemed clear that Genghis Khan now held this celestial endorsement. Unsurprisingly, loyalty to the Jin dwindled as more and more officials and military leaders defected to the Mongols. Soon the Mongols were able to consolidate their newly acquired territories with the help of loyal Chinese, Khitan, and even some Jurchen officials. Chinese soldiers, once fighting against the Mongols, now fought alongside them in the campaign to conquer China, an aspect we will explore in detail in future episodes. Zhongdu, once a thriving metropolis, was left a hollow shell after the Mongol conquest. The city was renamed Yen or Yenqing by the Mongols and maintained some administrative importance. However, it would only regain significant prominence decades later when Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, established a new capital near the site. But that chapter lies ahead of us. In the next episode, we'll see Genghis Khan return north of the Gobi Desert for the first time in 4 years, only to find turmoil brewing at home. While the Jin Dynasty struggles to recover from its defeats, unrest among the northern forest tribes threatens the stability of the Mongol Empire. We'll follow the Khan as he works to suppress these rebellions, pursue his fleeing enemies, and ultimately encounter the powerful Khwarezmian Empire, a meeting that will set the stage for one of history's most catastrophic invasions. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the History of the Mongols. Please like the video and leave a comment as it helps greatly, and subscribe if you want to hear more. Thank you, and see you all next time.